Good morning and welcome to what turned out to be our very first CT24 program. We were preempted last week for snow coverage. We start this first show of the new year talking about a newly released 2023 Law Enforcement Fatality Report. It was compiled by the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. That organization's CEO is Bill Alexander, and he joins us this morning by Zoom. Bill, thank you for being with us.
Eric, thank you for inviting me, and it's an absolute pleasure to be with you here this Sunday. So thank you in part, for telling the story of the men and women who have died in the line of duty, serving us, serving their communities in this great country. So thank you.
Well, it is such an important message to share that this does happen every year, unfortunately, across the country. The headline of this report, it's the kind of a story, Bill, where one is too many, but you look at this report and you see that the number of line of duty deaths decreased by 39%. There has to be some good news in that. Do you take it that way?
Well, of course, we don't like to use the turn of phrase good news when we're reporting on even a single police officer dying in the line of duty. And I know you don't mean it that way. We view it as a welcome trend for sure, but we wish the number every single year was zero in terms of the number of men and women who have died in the line of duty. But there's no question that it is a welcome trend compared to 2022, where we reported 224 such deaths. And now in 2023, we're reporting 136. So it really is a substantial reduction. A big part of that reduction is related to COVID-19 related deaths. So in 2022, we reported 74 such deaths, and now in 2023, we've only had 5. So that really does account for a bulk of the overall reduction. But the reality is that across all of the major categories which we track, we're really down in every single one of those categories.
So you put it much more delicately than I did, and much better stated to say that it's a good trend. And you talk about COVID, but of course the question is, beyond the fact that you say each of these categories seems to be creeping down, do you have an overarching reason why, or in each of the different types of or causes, could it be something different?
It is a combination of factors, I think. I think it really does have to do with broadly the profession. And I retired from myself from law enforcement about 2 years ago. So I hope your audience won't begrudge me still saying we, us, our when I talk about what I still view as our profession. But broadly, our profession has been thinking about for years and years, very intensely, how is we as an organization and a profession think about the safety of the men and women doing the job? How can we increase the safety of them? And not just the men and women doing the job, but by extension, how do we increase the safety of members of the public who they are sworn to protect? So everyone associated with law enforcement has been for years intensely focused on how can we make the job safer? And I think to some degree, the trend this year is hopefully reflective of those long efforts, whether that's traffic safety, whether that's move over laws, whether that's increased physical fitness for the men and women doing the job, whether it's men and women doing the job, taking more time and attention and giving themselves the ability to sort of focus on their response and hopefully giving themselves time, distance, and cover to make better decisions, hopefully less risky decisions. I hope to some degree that the numbers we're reporting are a reflection of that very, very long trend in law enforcement.
Well, let's talk about some of the specifics, because I think they do sort of tell the story. And I would imagine if you went out and asked some of our viewers, what would they be thinking of if a police officer lost their life, they wouldn't think of something like you said, like COVID-19, which of course is such a tragic occurrence. But they would probably think of firearms related deaths. It might be the first thing they think of. 47 officers in 2023 lost their lives as a result of gunfire. Is there a story in that? What about the trend in that particular piece of the report?
Yeah, again, of course, I would use the phrase welcome trend compared to 2022. The number is down, and we're absolutely happy that it is down. But out of all of the numbers that we were reporting this year, the firearms fatalities number is the one that gives me the most pause. And of course, when we say firearms fatalities, what I'm saying is that an officer out on the street encountered someone who produced a firearm and shot them with the intention of killing them. There's a definition, there's a word for that that's called murder. So 47 men and women in uniform were murdered last year at doing their job in an effort to protect their communities, to protect us. And the reason that number gives me pause is because our friends and partners at the Fraternal Order of Police also released their year-end report. They're largely focused, while they do talk about line of duty deaths, they're really focused on the number of men and women in uniform who have been shot in any given year. And by shot, I mean shot at and ultimately struck with a bullet. That number for 2023 was 378, and it's the highest it has ever been since the FOP started tracking the data. And it circling back, it does cause me pause when we were reporting now a reduction in overall firearms line of duty deaths for this year, because those two numbers don't align. Juxtaposed against the highest number of men and women who have been shot, And that doesn't even account for the number of times a police officer has been shot at, but the perpetrator missed. So it really does take some effort to try to square that circle. How are we reporting lower numbers of deaths in firearms, but more police officers are being shot? I have some ideas there. I think in part it's related to the continuing advance of medical care. I think it's in part related to continuing advances in the technology surrounding bullet resistant vests by companies like DuPont, who have just recently produced and released a really innovative, lightweight, much more comfortable, much more body conforming product. And I also think it's a product of many agencies issuing and training their officers in really advanced first aid kits. At the agency I work with, we called it a tactical emergency care kit. There's different names for them, but it's something much more than, say, your mother's old first aid kit with some band-aids and an ace bandage, right? It's got a tourniquet in there to stop bleeding from extremities. It's got some really advanced blood clotting stuff to stop open wounds, and it's got some chest wound sealing patches and more. While I don't have any hard data to say that I can, some sort of counterfactual where I know for a fact 10 or 20 police officers have been saved, I know from anecdotal stories from my peers that those are absolutely having an impact. So I think to some degree, all of those factors are creating a soup where more officers are surviving having been shot. And again, so we're reporting this lower number, but I don't know that it's really reflective of what I might argue is increasing danger for the men and women doing the job out on the streets.
Well, it's also so important, all those factors. I do want to ask you, I have friends who are police officers, and one thing that they have said to me is really, they spend all day in the car, they're driving around, and they always say the risk of automobile incidents is probably much higher than anything else that a police officer might face. We only have about a minute left, but of course, we covered the death in Hartford of Bobby Garton, a police officer who lost his life in a motor vehicle fatality. That was, in his pictures on our viewer's screen right now, that was such a big part of our story. Just in a few seconds, a big part of your report as well, Bill?
Absolutely. Of course, the number is down year over year from 2022 to 2023. We're reporting 37 traffic fatalities in 2023. I do think that is part of the sort of long extension of law enforcement looking at ways to make it safer. I think it in part is related to move over laws, where citizens are obviously encouraged and in some cases mandated to change lanes to give officers time and space as they are stopped on the side of the road. And of course, we're working with NHTSA, the National Traffic Highway, to make it to figure out where officers are facing those fatal encounters and how can the profession writ large find ways to make it safer for those men and women out on the sides of our roads. I think that is having an impact and showing in these numbers for 2023.
Well, with 23,785 names already on the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, I know this is important work. I appreciate you joining us to talk about this report. We'll continue to cover it. Bill Alexander, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for helping to tell the story of these American heroes. It means just absolutely everything to us, and I would argue everything to everyone who is in the law enforcement profession. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.